Hello and welcome to the Becoming Mindful podcast. Today we want to update you on all of the different changes we're doing with the podcast and some future endeavors, as well as talking about how can we use mindfulness to bring more meaning and purpose into our lives. I am Maria.
And I am Jackie, and we are Becoming Mindful.
All right, let's get started. So the biggest change to our podcast, as you can see, is that we have video now.
Hello, everyone.
This is us. I'm Maria.
And I'm Jackie.
After about a year and a half now on the podcast, on audio, I think both of us have grown a little bit, for me personally, on my art a little bit more, because I've been putting some effort into, being more present on social media and with people that might like my art. And I wanted to bring that to the podcast as well, because I know people like to see faces and you can connect better to someone that you can actually see, because it's a little bit closer to an in-person than if you just hear the voice, and getting more confident with it over time. And then I dragged Jackie into it too.
Yeah, but it's nice to put ourselves out there and show who we are. And I know that we'll get more into this in a minute, but one of the goals we wanted of our podcast was to elevate things like women's voices, people like us. It can be so helpful. I know when I'm consuming content, to be able to see who the creators are and just be able to connect with them a little more intimately and just get a little bit more of a personal experience. So we hope you all enjoy seeing our faces if you want to. If you don't want to, you can obviously still listen on just audio, but here we are, and I hope you enjoy this new format.
So yeah, we're adjusting to this. This is all new. Our first video recording, we spent a little bit of time before this, so
yeah,
all good. But yeah, I think this will help us connect a little bit more with you guys. And some of the other changes we've done to the podcast is, one, we switched platforms. So the audio version and maybe the video version as well is going to be on Spotify. We still have our website where we post all the episodes, but we changed that. And one of the bigger ones is we also moved to YouTube because of the video and so on. So we have a YouTube channel, which we're going to link below. I think it's actually called Becoming Mindful. So yeah, that's more the technical part of the change.
Yeah, and with this kind of change, as we're trying to connect more closely with our listeners, we really want to start to build up this community and create something that's more two-way and hear more from our listeners and get feedback. And this is our first step in doing that. We hope to create a Discord community and find some opportunities to connect with you all through social media and offering mindfulness practices and really doing some more hands-on and interactive kind of things, getting the community involved in becoming mindful.
Right. Yeah, because originally when we started this podcast, we wanted to become more mindful. We wanted to bring mindfulness into our lives, explore mindfulness, as well as practices that are helpful, books, all sorts of things. And the reason for the podcast, instead of just doing that by ourselves, was to share that with others that have similar goals or on the same journey that might bring them there faster or help, and also have some connection, because when we talked about this in the previous episode, community is a really big part. Mindfulness within a community is a very big part. Our stance to this has also changed over the time, because I know starting out we were talking a lot about being introverts, which we still are, but I think we've come to realize the importance of community a little bit more through this research on through this learning in this
Hmm.
field. And there we wanted to expand that and say, okay, what is it that can help others just like us? If we had that in the beginning of our journey, how would that leapfrog us to a further point? And so we thought about a community, maybe something where we can do something together once in a while, like a collective meditation session or just some discussions around the topic and adjacent topics, because that's also very important for us, the intersectionality with other topics. Yeah.
It's such an interesting thing because mindfulness and these practices, it's such a personal thing and it's very internal, and there's so much to do or to explore in solitude or with yourself. But there's that whole other component of community, like you're talking about. It's this whole other dimension of mindfulness that is incredibly important, and you can only go so far by yourself,
Right.
and then you need to turn outward and look outward. And I know we're going to talk more about this in the episode today, but there's just so much more that you can learn from being with each other and really applying this mindfulness to community, to relationships. Even just working with you, Maria, has opened up so much more. So, yeah, we're really excited to explore ways to bring in community and see what mindfulness really looks like as we create a mesh network of mindful people.
Yeah. Yeah. Find people that are like minded and struggle with the same
Yeah.
problems or have similar thoughts is always nice. Yeah. And then we can explore some topics together, maybe a little bit more deeper in the future.
Yeah.
So that's the changes to our podcast. Oh, and we have decided to set a regular recording and release date for our podcast episodes. Finally,
Getting
after a year and a
professional.
half. Yay. Yeah, so we're going to release the episodes on the first of each month and then record like the third Sunday before.
Yes, so you can count on regular episodes happening first of every month.
Yay. That's nice too. Okay.
All right, let's dive into this month's topic.
Yeah. So, what we wanted to talk about this month was the importance of meaningful work and mindfulness in our life. What does that mean to us? So maybe
Mm-hmm.
we'll start with, why is meaningful work, purpose important to
Yeah,
us or to people?
that's a good question. Maybe we can zoom out a bit and look at what the more ancient wisdom says about it, and those cultures that have a lot of mindfulness practices, they really give a heavy emphasis on a life of service and of giving back, of serving your community. And it's a really important pillar in having and living a mindful life. And you can see that across several different religions. It's not isolated to any one. So it's definitely a common thread that humans have come to again and again. I have some thoughts on how that has manifested in modern society, but definitely it's part of the foundation of living mindfully. What do you think, Maria?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it is. I mean, obviously, people come to different conclusions of what is meaningful or not.
For sure.
But I think that it is a very human thing to try and find purpose and meaning.
Yeah.
And even if it is coming to the conclusion that there is no purpose other than experiencing your life fully, that still is somewhat of a purpose. And I think it's
Yeah.
very important. A lot of people, when they feel like they don't know why or what they're going for in their life, inevitably don't feel very happy. And then I think the quality of your moments and your work will suffer from that.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think for a lot of people, absolutely for me, it's hard to find that purpose though.
Hmm.
That path to what's important is really difficult. I come back to how we experience life in our society, and there's so much noise around what you should do or what the typical path is, or even if you look at like the news or advertisements, everything is reinforcing this idea that there's a lot of scarcity or that you need to go in different directions. And I feel like there's all this external pressure saying this is your purpose, go this way, or look at this. And it can be really difficult to look internally and figure out what you're really passionate about, especially when you're young, because you're figuring out life. But there's a lot of pressure to figure out your passion when you're like a teenager, and it's such a tall order for a
I
kid.
mean, if you think about a lifespan, that's very early. Just from experience, I didn't really start figuring out what I really want in my life or what some meaning could be in my life till like my 30s, late 30s.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I started figuring it out in like my mid 20s, and I'm still figuring it out.
It
Yeah,
changes
yeah,
too. But I
that's
think there's
true.
some core truths. Thinking about it, it feels like there's really two sides to this. One is figuring out what you're really passionate about and what you really want to do, and going in that route, deciding to, I don't know, pursue a certain career that's outside the norm, maybe something that really makes you passionate. I don't know, maybe you rescue animals somewhere or something that traditionally would be considered a passion job, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But I think there's also this whole other side of we live in a society that doesn't really value people's happiness or fulfillment. And a lot of the jobs do feel meaningless, and maybe they even are, right? But you might be in a situation where you don't really have much of a choice, at least not immediately, or maybe you have some health issues, or maybe you have kids and you're in a situation where you cannot easily follow your passions. So there's two sides to it that I think we can apply mindfulness to. One is finding that passion and that path and where you can have your fire, and also bringing mindfulness into maybe a seemingly meaningless job or the life around that job.
And that's a interesting point too, because I think we've really tied up our passion with our vocation,
Mm,
and we really need to be making money at our passion. And I know I feel that pressure for sure. Your job can just be your job. A lot of us just need to make a living. We need to eat. We need to take
yeah.
care of our families, and our passion, our purpose, that can be something else. It can be, our family or something we do outside of work.
Mm,
It doesn't have to sustain you and bring you your money, bring you your livelihood. That's a lot to ask too. I think it takes a lot of work to fit that into your life if it's not your vocation, because work takes up a lot of time, a lot of energy. But I think that's where mindfulness can come in to help you to find where your passion can be woven into all of that and layer on top of all those things, even if you are working in what you might consider like a meaningless job. I was just listening to a talk that was talking about Lao Tzu, who wrote the and was talking about how that's one of the guarantees in life, that there will always be work, that there will always be work to do. And that's inescapable because it takes work to live. We constantly need resources to sustain ourselves. And I think accepting that is a great first step to freeing yourself to explore your passions, because work is work. And how can your purpose and your dharma be a part of what you do all day, even weaving it into just the way that you interact with people and the way you go about things and your perspective versus the tangible thing that you might be doing all day. There's just so many ways that mindfulness helps you to integrate it, I think.
And even if you're not really happy with your job and you don't really know how you can make it meaningful, but I think
Mhm.
you can make everything about it meaningful. So
Yeah.
let's think about coworkers and interaction with your coworkers. How can you make that interaction meaningful? Maybe there's something you can share with them that enriches their life, or some way you can connect with your coworkers where there is some sort of feeling of making the world a little bit better, something
A-
like that. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think we can all agree that the way that we treat each other is important. So meaning can be made in every interaction that you have, whether it's with your coworkers or your family or the barista who makes your coffee
Right.
or
Random
yourself.
strangers, right? Yeah. And if we can bring kindness to the world, and even just if you look at mindfulness from a interpersonal perspective of noticing things, everyone can benefit from that.
Yeah,
Just even if you just make someone feel seen, that's a big change, I think.
someone feels seen. Yeah, yes. Yeah, and that's as simple as it is, right? So bringing it back to mindfulness, it's about creating that pause, right? That space between what you're doing or your actions and your experiences, having a moment to be intentional and really decide what you want to do next. Otherwise, we get on this autopilot. And I know we talked about this with Sebastian a couple weeks ago, and you get on this autopilot and you're just going through the day. And it's so easy to not be mindful of the people you pass on the street or just someone in line at the store. And like you said, making people feel seen, saying hi, giving a compliment, just looking someone in the eyes.
Yeah.
And all it takes is that mindful breath, that little moment, just slowing down, being present, reminding yourself that you're here right now.
Yeah. Coming back into the moment, getting out of the worrying about what's going to happen, or ruminating on maybe not having made the right decision with a certain job or whatever. But if you take any moment, you can bring mindfulness into that, just noticing things, being there, present in that moment. Maybe can feel a breeze, or even if it's just a plant in your office, you
Yeah.
can look at the plant and you can be there and relax. And the interactions in any moment with people at work or to and from work.
Mhm.
We've done this way in the beginning when I was still in the office. I remember we wanted to pick up a mindfulness practice, right? That we do between episodes. And one of them was just a walking meditation from my car to the office. And then you create the spaciousness where you feel calm and relaxed and you feel a connection with your environment. And then you can start your day in a much better way.
Mhm. For me, I think that's how I really started getting into mindfulness practices and integrating it into my life. And then from there, it snowballed and started to show me that bigger picture of my passion and how I can really start to focus. Like we're talking about, or your vocation doesn't have to be your ultimate passion, and you can interweave that mindfulness throughout your day, but it can too. If you're lucky and you have the right circumstances, lean on mindfulness to help you find your passion and really make that your vocation.
Or you can have a job that pays for you being able to do your passion.
Yeah, that too. And just be able to
Yeah.
focus more of your efforts in that direction. I know for me, as I started to feel the effects of mindfulness and starting to get some clarity in my mind, it started to change how I looked at my work and what I spent my time on. For instance, some things that were maybe time wasters that I just did because I was tired. they didn't hold my attention as much anymore. And I wanted to be exploring things more meaningful to me. Not that it was easy because you're still working and don't have endless energy, but I think as you start to practice mindfulness and you get some clarity, you start to realize you get some discernment as to what maybe you're really passionate about versus what you've been programmed to think is important. At least that's how it went for me. Maybe I just actually learned that I should be doing this or I should be achieving this or like certain milestones in my career I had placed so much importance on. And as I stepped back and took some pauses, it was like I don't really think that's really meaningful to me. I think I need to reassess what my driving forces are, like what my motivations are.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think that's one of the big pieces that mindfulness can help you with, that inward focus of paying attention. The things you pay attention to are the things that not only will you see more of them in your life because confirmation bias, no, that's not the one. It's called something else. If there's something that you hold in your mind often, you'll see it more often.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. And that's one of the big ones too. You pay attention, you be mindful and focus on it. And also you can explore what is it you really want in life. You can ask
Yeah.
yourself questions, certain things you do. Why am I doing this? And do I need to be doing this? What would life be if I didn't do it?
Yeah.
And that can be a big or a small thing. Or what are the things that I feel like I'm lacking in my life, and how can I bring them into my life? For me, for example, the connection with nature. I know I did multiple things. I brought summer plants in my home. I ended up now working 100% remote, so I can be out here with my plants if I want to and go out in the yard and look out my window and see a plant and not just like some city building. So yeah.
I think what's important to note too, like you can just start to design your life in that direction. But it's not like you'll wake up tomorrow and you're like, you know what, my life's just going to be mindful and meaningful. No, like here's an opportunity where I can work from home more. And now I can create this environment that brings in nature. And now I can, maybe take those mindful walks on my breaks. And it's an iterative process, right? It's finding those opportunities to turn your life slightly in those directions and you're just honing your compass, right? You're not quite on a direct path and it's not immediate, but it's these little steps. And then after some time, you can step back and realize that you've made a difference. The perspective has just changed a little bit, the environment's changed a little bit, and that opens up more opportunity and then it gets a little easier.
Yeah. And I think one of the biggest pieces with that is when you look inward that way and ask yourself, what do you really want? If you make it more feeling based versus actual outcome based, how do I want to feel when I wake up? How do I feel when I go throughout my life? Who are the people? What kind of relationships do I want to have? Just in general, it's a lot easier to get there because exactly how it's going to look like is open. The specifics come later, right? So it's more the internal world, like how do you feel? How do you want to connect? That really brings in the outcome that is most meaningful, I would say.
I think you just hit the nail on the head. How to create a meaningful life. It is follow those feelings 100%. That is absolutely where I've made the most progress in my life too. You can take a look, think about what brings you fulfillment or what brings you energy. And I think this is an exercise that maybe introverts do because certain activities are very draining and so I've definitely taken stock of, okay, big social interaction is very draining for me. How do I recharge after that? And how do I feel? And that's a good exercise to start listening to how you feel.
Talking about the social interactions, that's a really good point because I think when you really pay attention to this, I've noticed for myself that it's not really true that all social interactions drain me.
Right. It's not all.
It's not all. It's the specifics around it, right?
Yeah. But I think for a lot of people, it's hard to figure out what we feel, like what feels good, what feels right, because I think we've been on that autopilot for so long. At least I'm speaking for me. I'm
Mhm.
speaking in generalities. You get on that autopilot and you lose touch with your gut and what feels good and what doesn't. I think some advice there is to take your time and just try and explore and be curious. Going back to what you said, you start to think about what feels good. And I think a huge thing that happens there is that you can start to let go of things that don't feel good. And it's very freeing. It really feels like weight lifting off your shoulders when you don't internalize things like the negativity in media or certain people in your life that maybe you just need to meter or maybe not see as often, or certain activities that you need to start saying no to,
Mm.
something like that. But I feel like when you start to listen to yourself, you can quickly start to stop taking on all of the things that are draining for you or not meaningful to you, and you can start to recognize them more and more easily.
Yeah. And interestingly, that's also one of the things where community does come in, is because if you do connect with the people that do not drain you and that are uplifting, we help each other too. So things can be easier in the society, at least here in the US and most of the Western world. We have this rugged individualism where we have to
Mhm.
master all of this by ourselves. And we still think that way, and finding things out and bringing mindfulness to our lives and making the world better. And it's okay. But we can also do this collectively and share of that, not only the physical workload, but even mental workload. And that's something that has been even scientifically proven, that human brains interlink with other human brains. And if you interact with someone, some of your mental capacity will be offloaded. So you can work together on that. That's why
Yeah.
we have language and facial expressions, and we
I
can
was
learn
just
from
reading
each other.
I was just reading a book and I cannot remember what it was. And they were talking about, like, you could have one genius, but if they're not social, if they're not talking to other people, that genius is really contained in just that one person. But if you've got someone who is outgoing and more connected to the community, they're going to share that genius and they're going to get ideas off of other people and iterate on their ideas and get inspiration and teach other people. That social component is so critical.
Yeah. Then you have one genius and the impact is way greater. You have suddenly 50 people that are maybe not geniuses, but they were able to learn something from the genius. I don't know if it was in the Humankind book, but I remember reading something like that about Neanderthals.
You know what? I
Like,
think it
I
was
think that was
Humankind.
in the book.
I think that was it because I just read that book
Yeah,
on your
exactly.
recommendation. Yeah, that was really
Yes.
good.
Yeah, and we're definitely going to talk about that book too. But yeah, that was one of the things that was mentioned, is that the Neanderthals were actually really smart and had a higher percentage of really smart, like geniuses. But however, they didn't really have the facial expressions and the learning capacity, the social capacity as much as humans have. Homo sapiens, who
Yeah.
are more able to connect and pick up things and be like a copycat, essentially.
We had the social skills.
And that's very interesting. But coming back to what's meaningful, I think there is a lot of self-exploration, but there's also things you can look at to other cultures, and especially indigenous cultures. And if you look back in history, it's very interesting to look at work. What is even work and purpose if you look
Yeah.
back in history, right? Recently, I've heard someone say something about the Dark Ages and, how we think, oh, like, it's so much better now, which it is. We have definitely a better quality of life if you think about medicine and so on. But it is not true that these people worked all day long. They probably didn't work as much as we did
Yeah.
because they didn't have to there was like no mass production, and there was no someone needs to have profits. There was some of that, because obviously you had the church and you had like kings who would essentially take some off the top. But I think overall, most people were not working as much. And they were more connected with the actual outcome of their job, because
Exactly.
they were farming or doing something that would directly impact them. Versus if you're doing what I do, or you do even, like, okay, how does this directly relate to some meaningful impact somewhere? So it's very hard to find that connection. It reminds me a little bit of what Robin Wall Kimmerer said in her book about the connection of all of the things, the materials, to the original plant, or like the mountain or whatever, where it's really hard once you have a computer. Now I'm so far removed from the origin.
Yeah. That was a huge realization with my career when I first started getting some clarity around my purpose, that, yeah, it was so abstracted. I was doing digital marketing and it was just so far removed from my community or what I actually needed. I was getting paid, but there's something about growing your own food, for instance. Like, you just made this tangible thing and it just grew out of the ground, and this is what I need to survive. This is my life. That's amazing. And I remember when we first bought our land and we needed to dig a well, and just the idea that clean water is just coming out of the ground. There are things that we so easily take for granted. We turn on the tap and water comes out. You go to work and that's not really directly connected to those basic needs. When I started teaching yoga, for instance, I had people directly in front of me and it was so much more tangible what I was doing. I think that's such a really good point as to what an obstacle it can be in trying to find meaning in our work today, because it's so abstract and so removed. You're still going to work so that you can have clean water and so you can have food and so can have shelter, but
it's not actually creating that. Yeah, you do something
for someone else.
For someone else.
Yeah.
If you work in manufacturing directly, or if you work in healthcare, nurse or something, that's different. You're more connected. But if for me, IT, okay, so I help people have a better experience with their software so they can work better. What does that even mean? Sometimes it's a little hard. And looking at the other side, like my art and making art, and especially making art that connects to mindfulness, I feel like a way more tangible. That's controversial too, because art, you wouldn't consider this necessarily a basic need. But then on the other hand, I feel that art is a basic need, because society or humans without art in some way, shape, or form, music, painting, whatever, I don't think that would be very meaningful life or not a very good life. And I think the same applies to things like yoga or something. Like having that practice is important. Having mindfulness in our life is important. And but yeah, that definitely was a lot easier to find that connection there and say, yeah, here I'm making something that is directly helping someone or impacting someone to have a better life in a way.
You can bring it back to the connections that you were talking about earlier too, though. You go to work and maybe it's not super tangible, the effect that you're having or the meaning that your job has, but it can make other people's lives better, which lets them go home and have more peace. How you interact in a meeting or on a call, or bringing something in for your coworkers just to put a smile on people's face. That's really meaningful and it really ripples.
Exactly. Yeah, you can still make a great impact even if you don't see the direct connection there.
Yeah, but as we've been talking about, I think it just builds up. You start in these little ways and you find these little pockets of mindfulness and presence, and then that just builds on itself and starts to take over more and more areas of your life. I think it's really difficult to say, okay, what's the meaning of my life? And figure out that question right now, instead of just what's the meaning of this moment, and what's the meaning of today, and what's the meaning of this relationship, and just start to build those little blocks, and then you stack them up and they'll create something beautiful.
Yeah, and I think it also circles back to a topic we've talked about in the beginning of this year, was the radical acceptance. When you go into your day with that mindset of accepting what is, it definitely gives you not only the chance to be at peace with what is in some way, shape, or form, but also to calmly find ways to improve the situation.
Yeah, you can just keep trying to improve. I think that's the bottom line, right? Just try to do a little better at each opportunity.
Right. Because if you don't do that and you go into it with a non-mindful, reactive pattern, you're in fight or flight mode, then will not improve the situation. Or you obviously then can't accept it, and you're not going to feel very good. And it's also bad for your body, of course, being in a perpetual stress, fight or flight mode. You have cortisol. And I think that's a big thing in our society. A lot of people live in that mode.
Yep. And when you're in flight or fight, you're hyper focused on problems and dangers and threats and looking for what danger needs your attention next. And we really prime people to be in that mode all the time. But if you can get out of that, get out of fight or flight and get into rest and digest, get into your parasympathetic nervous system, that's when you can start to see those nuances of life that are happier and more kindness and beauty and inspiration and thoughtfulness, and all of that lies beyond fight or flight, right? You have to slow down.
Right. If you're in fight or flight, you cannot see those things because your body wants to survive. A lot of those calm and beautiful and happy moments, you just cannot perceive them if you're in that mode.
It's this feeling of scarcity, right? And when you slow down, you can recognize abundance and find gratitude. Those kinds of things are almost impossible to do when you're in fight or flight and when you're in that mode. So when you start to slow down and teach yourself how to get into that mode more often by doing mindfulness practices and having those in like your toolbox to go, okay, that's how I do a gratitude practice. That's how I get inspiration for my art, for my passion, for connecting with others.
And it allows you to also be more open to others, other cultures, other people and their plights and or not.
Exactly. Learning, expanding your mind, expanding your experience, being open to new things.
Yeah, and I think being mindful and slowing down and having that mindset is really a radical thing. It is also a resistance.
It's rebellion.
Yeah, because you are resisting the hustle culture, the capitalism, right?
Yep.
The mindless individualism. I think we definitely need to make an episode at some point of how mindfulness radicalizes us.
Good way.
In a good way. Yes.
It's what we need. It's like what our whole society needs, at least I think. This like almost civil disobedience of mindfulness.
Yes, we're not consuming. We're being in the moment. We're not distracted.
We are content.
Yeah, and we're aware of things.
And we're just having a great time.
Yeah, and seeing through all the BS. Definitely worth an episode. I hope that listeners, viewers now, not only listeners, I hope that you took away something for your own life. Maybe you have some ideas of where you want to start and maybe put some mindfulness into your life. If you do, definitely comment, let us know. We love to hear from anyone if this content brings something, enriches your life in any way. Please let us know. We love to hear that. And that also helps to know that we're doing something meaningful.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Let us know. Again, we want to hear from you all, hear from you on how you integrate mindfulness into your life. How did it help you find your passion or find meaning in your life? Yeah, we want to hear more experiences out there. Bring it in. And you can reach out to us on our social media at Becoming Mindful Podcast on YouTube now as well. And you can also find all of our links and show notes and links to the podcast on our website at becomingmindfulpodcast.com.
Thank you for tuning in. And we will announce the next episode somewhere in mid-month, I would say, before we record.
So thanks for listening. And until next time, be well.